All right, welcome back, everybody. We are live today. I have a super special training for you guys. You're going to learn how to find the best suppliers on Alibaba in the shortest time possible. I know that there was a lot of demand for this. Over 400 of you guys registered to join us. I know some of you guys may not be able to catch live, so I welcome those watching the replay as well. And I did share your questions with Brett, and we're going to try to answer as many of them as we can. All right. So, first off, I'd like to welcome everybody. My name is Gary Huang. Today's training has been brought to you by 80/20 Sourcing and the Seven Figure Seller Summit. I'm very privileged to have Brett Ducker from Alibaba with us. Welcome, Brett. How's it going?
Hi, it's going well. Hi, everyone.
Ex- Yes, yes, excellent. Welcome, Brett. So today's training again is to how to find the best suppliers on Alibaba in the shortest amount of time possible. It's going to be about a 60-minute training. If you stay until the end, we'll give you some more special bonuses that Brett has prepared for you. And because this is live and we got started a couple minutes early, I would like to welcome everybody as you come in. Can you please type your name and where you're joining us from, just to make sure everything is working correctly? All right. So just a quick update about myself. Since Seven Figure Seller Summit last month, there's been some changes. You might notice a different background behind me. This is actually a real like Japanese like paper wall. I actually moved like our house, like my family, I moved to another part of Okinawa just so that it's bigger for our family, and that's why I kind of have been silent for the past month or so. So I appreciate everybody for coming back, and I'm glad everyone is here. All right. So I'd like to welcome, first off, Brett Ducker today. Brett is part of Alibaba's RFQ team. And for those of you guys that aren't familiar, RFQ stands for Request for Quotation. And he runs RFQ Pro, which helps larger buyers connect with the best supplier leads on Alibaba, mainly for orders of $30,000 or more. And Brett has firsthand experience sourcing a wide range of customized products, including apparel, electronics, sporting goods, drinkware, and backpacks. And he was buying stuff on Alibaba. He was an Alibaba.com buyer for 5 years before joining the team to help make the buyer's experience even better. So, as part of the RFQ team, he works to continue to improve their RFQ tool and expand RFQ Pro. So, he's really going to give you the inside look on how to create the best RFQ, to find the best suppliers, how to save time, and he's going to walk you through this. So, sorry for my long spiel to start. Brett, quickly, I'd like to welcome you again. Can you tell us where are you joining us from today, by the way?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm in Pasadena, California at the Alibaba office. Alibaba has several offices in California, and then we have one in New York. But this is where the US-based RFQ team operates out of. And then we also have part of the RFQ team in Hangzhou, which is where the headquarters is in China for Alibaba.
Awesome. And can you share maybe in a couple minutes your background? How did you get started working at Alibaba? I know you were living in China prior to being in Pasadena, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I lived in China for 5 years. I was in Xi'an, which is where the Terracotta Warriors is. I was over there studying, working with some cross-border companies. And when I returned to the US, I became a buyer for a promotional products company. Basically, this company did a lot of marketing with corporate customers and government customers. And I was in charge of sourcing from overseas, with the main foreign market we're sourcing from being China. So, living in China for 5 years, it was kind of a natural fit for me to stay connected with the country and the community. So I was sourcing mainly through Alibaba for about 5 years, meeting suppliers, basically arranging all of our overseas supply chain through suppliers we met on Alibaba.com. So last year, when I actually got introduced to some of the people inside of Alibaba.com over in California, I was invited to join the RFQ team, and then earlier this year was when I came on board. So I'm part of the RFQ team, which operates the RFQ tool on Alibaba.com. I'll share some more details about the tool a little later. But personally, I'm responsible for RFQ Pro, which utilizes the RFQ tool on Alibaba.com, but with some more hands-on service that's oriented towards our larger buyers to help them through the process and basically get connected to some of the best leads we can identify for their projects.
Perfect. That's great. And before we get started, I'd like to welcome some of the guests joining us today. Welcome Trish from Melbourne. G'day. Welcome Art. And yes, Art, this will be recorded. There will be a replay. Welcome Gary from NYC. Good to see you. Araceli from Texas. Brian from London, Ontario, Canada. Charlene from Loganville, Georgia. Angela from New Zealand. Shiriar from Pakistan. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Vanessa from Singapore. David from Arizona. Sharon from England. Enya from Vancouver. JJ from Sydney. Darlene from Macon, Georgia. Rosette from UK. Richard from Canada. Anne from Alberta. Camille from Indiana. And Tanya from Auckland. So we have a global audience today. Super excited. Welcome
Wow.
everybody to be here. And we're going to cover a lot today. Brett is going to get to your questions at the end. Okay. But I'm curious, before we get started, maybe you guys can type in the chat because we have a lot of people here today. What is your number one sourcing question right now? And then I think we're going to cover a lot of stuff during the presentation, but we'll also get to it in the end. So if you want to take a minute to put that in first, that would be great. And also welcome Jackie from Melbourne and Marvin from SC. I think that's South Carolina. Awesome. Okay, Brett, before we get started, as we're talking right now, we're still kind of in the midst of the pandemic. Sourcing has changed a lot. The whole supply chain has been through this kind of perfect storm with, all of the logistics challenges, et cetera. I'm just curious, in your perspective, what has changed in the past couple years in the whole sourcing process, especially given the pandemic? And most people can't fly to China. We can't go to Canton Fair. What are you seeing? I mean, from your perspective, Brett?
Yeah, it's absolutely forced people to better utilize online tools. So
Mhm.
Alibaba.com has always been an online platform to get buyers and sellers connected. Previously, though, it was really convenient, easy to travel over to China to visit trade shows, to visit factories, and kind of build a relationship with certain partners in person. But since we can't travel over to China, a lot of that has to be done through messages and through um, not FaceTime, but whatever video app that you use. And it's kind of created a barrier for some people, but it's also created an opportunity for people to basically utilize the tools that they have, avoid the expense and the time of traveling overseas to find all of these suppliers and talk to them in person, and basically be able to cut cost and streamline the way that they source. It's challenging though. It's not an easy thing to do. It takes some some trial and error, a lot of experience and time to try to work out a system that works for yourself, to basically do those things you used to do in person all online now.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, we have to be resourceful. And I love what you said about the, with the crisis comes opportunity. That's like a famous saying in Chinese, right? Like 危机 with crisis, there's opportunity. So I feel like there is an opportunity that we're sitting on right now. And
Absolutely.
um, and for today's training, who's the training for today exactly, Brett?
So anyone who uses Alibaba.com who's struggled with navigating the jungle that is Alibaba.com, I'm here to provide some tips, some pointers on some tools that are available on Alibaba.com to basically be able to process the information that you see and to get the most out of what Alibaba as a platform can offer.
Excellent. All right. So I see some questions coming in already, and then we'll try to get to as many as we can, and we'll save some for the end as well. All right. So let's get started, Brett. So let's as we begin, let's kind of define a lot of this terminology that a lot of people may not be familiar with. So, what is an RFQ, and also what is an RFP?
Got it. Yeah, it's a great starting point to first define what these are, because basically, anytime you reach out to a supplier, a vendor, to talk about your needs, you're basically presenting them with either an RFQ or an RFP. So I'll better define what exactly they mean. So RFQ, as you said earlier, stands for request for quote. It's a method used by organizations to solicit pricing from vendors. So RFQs are most suitable when a buyer can like describe their exact product needs through specifications, through pictures. The more standardized and specific your request is, the more likely this method will produce effective results. So RFP is very similar. It stands for request for proposal, but it's more a method used to solicit proposals, solicit responses from vendors when a buyer's requirement is more complicated or other factors besides pricing may need to be evaluated. So the purpose of both of these methods, though, is to create an organized and structured packet of information to provide to suppliers, explaining your requirements. So it's very important to make your product and your order requirements as clear as possible, and to present them in a consumable manner. So what you don't want to do is provide like requests that are full of white noise. White noise meaning irrelevant information, or submitting like a request that's poorly structured, because it increases the likelihood of vendors like missing important information, and them not catching your point. Like when I first started out, in as a buyer, we did a lot of government bids, and my number one complaint back then was, uh, the buyer has a very simple request, but the request is presented on 5 pages of documents. So in order to uh, absorb and understand what the buyer wants, that information is only a paragraph long, but you have to read through 5 pages to find that key information, and it makes it difficult for suppliers to understand and address your needs if you take that important information and you cover it with irrelevant information. And it also presents an additional challenge because they're probably looking at your information in English, and English is a second language for the supplier. So you want to make your packet of information as clear and concise and as user friendly as possible.
Great advice, golden advice. Be specific, be concise. Don't have a lot of white noise. Don't give them 5 pages of text to read through when the critical information is only a paragraph long. It's like the 80-20 rule, right? Like be concise, get to the point. And also, I also love what you said about considering that English is probably their second language. So you probably don't want to use jargon and, stuff like that. Be like, you know, be
Yeah.
very like just, direct, right?
If you have a document too, I suggest that it's a typed document. Don't send over a picture of a handwritten document. No offense, but most people's handwriting probably isn't clear enough for an ESL person to clearly understand. I know half of people's writing, I can't even read it, and English
Right,
is my first
right.
language, so
Yeah, yeah. Great advice. Okay, excellent. And I also like to quickly welcome a couple of people that are just joining in now. I think they arrived a little late. If I can scroll up, welcome Allison from Auckland. Great to see you. And if I can get my window to scroll up as well. Welcome. Um, And Danny from Canada, Paulo from Amsterdam as well. And thank you guys for your questions. I do see your questions and we'll get to as many as we can. Thank you. Okay, perfect. So now that we clarified the difference between RFQ and RFP and some of Brett's best practices, what is an RFQ on Alibaba.com, Brett?
All right. So an RFQ on Alibaba.com is a little different from a traditional RFQ. So on Alibaba.com, an RFQ also includes the concept of an RFP. So the RFQ tool has a wider breadth of function. So I like to think of the RFQ tool on Alibaba.com more as a supplier leads generator, because it can be utilized for a variety of like sourcing requests. So the purpose of RFQ is to more efficiently match you with the right supplier. So you can skip the time consuming process of sourcing manually through the search tool. So basically, how RFQ works is a buyer will complete the RFQ form on Alibaba.com, and then the request is sent out to a market of suppliers. So relevant suppliers, they'll be notified, and suppliers can also use keywords to search for your RFQ. So most vendors, they'll check the RFQ market once or twice a day, and they'll reply to pushed RFQs, or they'll search for RFQs where the keywords fall under their main um, product line. So there's a few advantages that this format offers a buyer. Buyers on using the RFQ tool on Alibaba.com, they can connect up to 10 suppliers with one request. So instead of going through the search tool and reaching out individually to 10 suppliers, you can put your RFQ out to the market, and then up to 10 interested suppliers will respond to you. So if you have an RFQ that's for something that's really hot in the market or widely available, there's lots of vendor competition, then you'll definitely get 10 responses, and you actually may get 11 or 12 responses, because vendors also have the option, if 10 responses have already been provided to your RFQ, they can pay to provide an additional response. And then finally, buyers can find vendors that are interested in working with them. So this is an important point, because it depends on your size as a buyer and your the size of your request, and the feasibility of your request. So not only are buyers trying to judge suppliers and figure out which supplier is the best to work with, suppliers are doing the same. So suppliers are seeing their buyers request and deciding, like, is this buyer worth my time to respond to? Is this the type of buyer that I want to build business with? So the RFQ tool lets you instantly filter out that layer and get connected with buyers who, or with sellers who want to engage and do business with you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, sometimes people forget this is a two-way street, right? You're not just evaluating the supplier is evaluating you as a potential buyer as well. So I like what you said about that. So let's keep going, Brett. I know you have some slides to share as well. Let me know when you'd like to share them. The next question I have is so my understanding, there's a couple ways that you can use Alibaba, right? There's the sourcing versus using the search tool in Alibaba on the search bar, and also sourcing via RFQ. These two different methods. What's the difference between these two?
All right. So, uh, sourcing via the search tool and sourcing via RFQ, they're both done with the same goal in mind, and that's obviously to find the right supplier to work with. So each sourcing method provides a unique value, no matter what you're looking for. So I would compare like the search tool and the RFQ, while looking at like a couple of different ways to source. So the first one would be sourcing visually. Some people like to source visually. Like, they'll go onto Alibaba.com and they'll browse for products. Maybe they don't have a specific idea of what they want, but they're looking for inspiration or they're looking for what's available. So in this situation, the search tool definitely provides, I'd say, the most unique value, because you can search via keywords. You can also upload a picture and search that way. But with RFQ, you can also work RFQ to get some interesting responses. So if you have, let's say, for example, like a bottle that you've seen on the US market, you think it's interesting, you want to sell something similar, but you want to see what's available. So you could upload the picture, upload um, general requirements for what you're looking for, send it out to the seller market saying that you're interested in finding similar bottles to this. Then you can work RFQ that way to see what vendors offer. Another way would be people who source for stuff by specs. So you can obviously use the search tool and use keywords to get results, but it's going to take a lot of time to go through all the different product listings and look at the specs listed to see if they match what you're looking for. So in this situation, I would say that RFQ probably provides the most value. So you could upload your spec sheet, whatever you have, a drawing, um, to RFQ. Write out your specs as I described before in a simple, straightforward manner, and then send it out to the supplier market, and then suppliers will be able to see your key points and then provide a response based on that. Another one would be if you're sourcing by supplier qualification. So sometimes these qualification data points are hard to find if you go through the search tool. So you could do the same thing. You can draft an RFQ, send it out to the market with your key points being that you're looking for suppliers with certain qualifications, and then you can filter the responses based on your qualification needs. The last one,
Right.
like
Sorry.
I,
I'm sorry to
oh,
interrupt.
yeah, yeah, please.
This is very very interesting. When you say sourcing by supplier qualification, can you give an example of a qualification?
Yeah, so some people are looking for um, like factory audits, like based on like environmental standards or like human rights standards, working conditions, stuff like that. So that type of information isn't readily available within the supplier profile. You'd have to like reach out and like ask if they've done the specific type of audit that you're looking for. So you can put those requirements into RFQ, and then vendors will see that you're looking for a factory that has that particular audit, and then connect with them that way.
I see. And one of the common questions that I get is in terms of the qualifying the supplier while we're on this topic is how can you tell a factory from a trading company, right? Because sometimes on Alibaba they list the same company lists themselves as both manufacturer and trading company. Um, can you shed some light on that? Like, what does that mean? And in your view, is it better to deal with the factory or vice versa?
Absolutely. Yeah, so this is a really common question. There's two types of main suppliers on Alibaba.com and within the Chinese supplier community. You have gold suppliers, and then you have verified suppliers. So gold suppliers, if you look on the supplier profile page, all that information has been provided by the supplier. So in order to qualify that information or verify it, you'd probably have to go through like a third party inspection company, do a factory inspection like that to confirm all the information. So Alibaba's verified supplier program, on the supplier's profile page, we've already done that work to verify basic points like whether the type of business the supplier is, whether they're a manufacturer, whether they're a trading company, whether they're a manufacturer slash trading company. I'll shed a little more light on that in a second. the main products that they sell, the main markets that they sell to, the size of the company, where they're located. That basic information has been verified by a third party, so all of it's accurate. So if you're looking for the easiest way to find dependable information, to get a snapshot of the supplier you're working with, I recommend to work with verified suppliers only, because that information has already been confirmed by a third party. When it comes to whether you're working with a manufacturer, a trading company, or a manufacturer slash trading company, it takes a little work, a little massaging of the information to get a full picture. Let me quickly define what they are. So a manufacturer is obviously a factory. They produce goods. But in China, if you're a factory and you produce goods, you may not be able to export them. You have to have an exporting license. So a trading company doesn't have a production line, they don't have a factory, but they have an export license. The third type is the what you see on Alibaba.com, a manufacturer slash trading company. So this is like a combination business structure that's common in China, where you have a factory, but they also have a trading department that has the license to export. So the listings of products on Alibaba.com are put up by the suppliers. So one way to work them and to identify who's making what is look at a verified supplier, look at the type of business they are, and then look at their main products. So if you have a manufacturer slash trading company, they probably sell a lot of products. So uh, all the products that they sell may not necessarily be produced in house. You should look at their main products on the profile page, and you'll see what they produce in house. Basically, their core competency. Other products that may be related but don't fall within their main products are probably products that they're procuring from other factories and then selling through their trading department. So you need to remember, though, that not all manufacturers may necessarily be accessible to you as a buyer. There's some manufacturers, they don't have any English speaking staff. They're not interested in going through the work or the red tape to be able to export directly. Or they may be a small business that's focused on a very particular product line. So the only way you could access those products is through a trading company. Uh, so I would say that, of course, we all want to work directly with the manufacturer. If you're a large buyer, then you have a lot more buying power and leverage, and you'll be able to probably connect directly with manufacturers a lot easier than smaller buyers would. But at the end of the day, I would say that whether you're working with a trading company or a manufacturer, that's not the key thing that you want to look at. You want to compare other metrics like the price you're getting, the service you're getting, the quality and dependability of the service. Working with trading companies, for small buyers especially, is probably most beneficial, because trading companies are more focused on the service aspects, where they have a lot of relationships with manufacturers, and they're more concerned about providing service to the buyers, doing quality control, and making sure that the buyer is able to basically import their products. So a lot of times, like especially for smaller buyers, you may not be familiar with the importing process, customs declaration, all of that stuff that makes international commerce quite complicated. Trading companies, they fill that gap where they're able to step in, offer delivered duties paid pricing. They're able to better arrange international logistics and all of that.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks for that explanation. Let's keep going. Is there anything else that you wanted to add in terms of the sourcing via search tool versus RFQ, or should we move forward?
I can share my screen quickly and just point out a couple things on the website. All
Absolutely. Let's
right,
do it.
cool. Okay, so we're on Alibaba.com right now. I just want to show everyone the entry points into RFQ, because sometimes it's not super obvious looking at the homepage of the website. So the first one you can find is under Buyer Central. If you hover over here, then you'll have Submit RFQ. You'll be able to go directly to the RFQ page. Um, Another thing while I'm here, especially for our newer buyers, I definitely recommend going to Buyer Central and clicking on blog and just kind of reading through and understanding all of these things. There's a lot of good informational resources under the Buyer Central blog here that kind of walks you through the process of operating on Alibaba.com. And it has some information about international trade terms, logistics, and stuff like that. So it's a great resource. Another entry point is under My Alibaba. You go to My Alibaba and you can go down here to manage RFQ. The third one, if you scroll down on the home page, then there's the RFQ banner here. You can enter into it from there also. And then it'll bring us to, this is the RFQ form. So I'm going to zoom out because I can scroll down a bit here. So this is basically the form. And when you fill this out, it's important to basically provide as much information as possible. So you'll put in the product name and the system will automatically assign it a category. Double check to make sure that category is accurate. It's accurate like 99% of the time, but it's a good thing to check. The sourcing type, it'll ask you whether you're sourcing for wholesale, retail. That's always good to fill in and provide to the vendors so they have a better understanding of what kind of buyer you are. Quantity you definitely want to fill in. I would recommend um, doing a quantity that you may not necessarily be your initial order, but what you expect the average order to look like once you build this relationship. It's a good way to get vendors interested and to have a more deep discussion about cooperation. The trade terms is important. Um, there's a lot of trade terms offered here. I'd say there's probably three trade terms though that are most important or most used. What it shows here is FOB. So usually if you're shipping via sea freight, then you'll want to do FOB. The vendor will be responsible for getting it onto the ship, and then you take over from there. The other one would be EXW, where basically if you're sending something via FedEx, via UPS, then you can do EXW, where you pay uh, for the goods to be finished at the factory, and then UPS, FedEx, whoever picks it up at the factory and delivers it. With EXW, you'll be paying for the duties when it clears customs in the U.S. And the final one would be DDP, delivered duties paid. Some people call it door-to-door pricing. This one is, I would say, important for beginner buyers or buyers with less experience. DDP, um, delivered duties paid, basically means the supplier will be responsible for everything, getting it delivered to your door. Since they're responsible for everything, you're also paying for that service, but it's definitely worth it if you're an inexperienced buyer, you're not exactly sure how to do importing and everything. That's the safest route to go. All right.
Great.
Okay, we can
Excellent.
continue.
Okay, I love that tip about the quantity. So don't just put in your MOQ of like 300. Rather, put in an estimated, uh, like a real order if the product does get traction, if it does rank. I think that will that will make it more attractive for buyers as well. So that was a great tip, Brett. Thanks for that. All right, so let's stop the screen share. Let's keep going. And thanks everybody for your questions. We're going to get to them at the end. Welcome, Blessing from UK, Emmanuel from Ireland as well. Okay, so let's come back to our faces. All right, so so we talked a little bit about using the different search tools. Let's talk about a little bit of the nitty-gritty in terms of timing, right? In order to get more responses, when is the best time to send an RFQ, Brett?
Nice, nice. Yeah. So sourcing is also about strategy. So when you use RFQ, if you're in the US, then the best time for you to send an RFQ, if you're on the East Coast, would probably be right after you get off of work. So between 5 and 8 p.m. Um, what you ideally want to do is you want the RFQ to be available to the supplier like between 8 and 10 a.m. China time. So this way, the ranking of the RFQ, if you're looking like at a time log of the RFQs, it's closer to the top. It's fresher. You can hit them when they're at work in the morning, and then if you do that, so the RFQ is available for them morning time China, then you can usually expect at least a few responses the next day when you get up.
So, if I understand correctly, you said that the suppliers usually look at their RFQs in the mornings, China time, between 8 to 10 a.m. Beijing time. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Okay. So, if you convert it to US, like East Coast, that would be about, it's right after you get off work. So, it's like 7 to 9 p.m. or 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern time. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Awesome. Great tip. All right. And how about in terms of sourcing with RFQs? What should buyers expect when sourcing with RFQs? And I know it is a challenge. A lot of people that filled out the survey said, where do I begin? How do I navigate through all these manufacturers? What should buyers expect, Brett?
Got it. Um, so this is a very important question. I would approach it like this. Our RFQ, it's the type of tool where the quality of your input impacts the quality of your output. So buyers should, of course, describe their needs in a straightforward, concise manner. But I would also say don't ask too much of the vendor um, to begin with. You want to ask just enough to solicit a response and to be able to do an initial judgment of the vendors. So if you send over like a complicated RFQ, lots of requirements, and you're like, give me pricing, um, you I would say that you probably couldn't expect to get exact pricing as the initial response. So you want to build your RFQ where you provide enough information for the supplier to be interested and understand what you need, but you don't want to overwhelm them. Otherwise, they're not going to spend an hour just to prepare an initial response to the RFQ. They want to get in contact with you and take the next step. So I would definitely structure RFQs like that. Provide information to describe what you want. Don't overwhelm the vendor. Just make sure that you are looking for responses so you can do an initial judgment of the vendor. And then you can take the next steps to after you do an initial judgment of the responses, decide which one looks professional, which one addressed my needs, which one is relevant to what I'm looking for, and then click the chat now button, reach out to the suppliers, and then have a discussion. Go over the important details of your request, make sure that they understand it, um, and then see if the supplier has any questions for you. Uh, so a lot of times, like I'd help a buyer build an RFQ, and we think we have like all of the information a supplier would need to provide a price. But most of the time, you provide that information to the supplier, and then the supplier will come back with questions that we didn't think of. And they're important questions, details that weren't obvious to us initially, but affects the response from the supplier. So be prepared to use RFQ to source leads, to be able to do an initial review of the suppliers that respond, and then reach out to the suppliers that look like promising leads. So if I could share my screen one more time, then I can show like how buyers can compare RFQ responses on the RFQ comparison page.
Great,
All
please
right,
do.
cool. All right, so this is the RFQ comparison page. So this buyer sent out an RFQ for golf balls, and then there were, I think, 10 suppliers that responded with an offer. So there's some important information that I would first look at when I'm judging who to reach out to discuss more about. The first everyone goes to is probably the unit price. So what I like about RFQ is since you get all of these responses from a lot of different vendors, you can kind of gauge what the market price is for an item. Some items, like if you see the fourth item, the price is way higher than the other items. So maybe there's a reason that that item is a lot higher. You can reach out to the supplier, ask them why their goods are so much higher than everyone else's. It may start an interesting discussion. You may find out stuff about the product that you had no idea about before, and then be able to reapproach the other vendors with a better idea of what you're looking for. So that's one thing. Um, the next thing would be to look at their business type. So, as I mentioned before, you have manufacturers, you have trading companies, and you have manufacturer slash trading companies. So, if you see this check mark here, the check mark means that that information has been verified. So, these are verified suppliers. This guy doesn't have a check mark. It says it's a manufacturer. He most likely is a manufacturer. That information just hasn't been verified by a third party. So I would look at that. And then the next thing, look at their main products. So these four vendors, their main products are golf balls. If you go to their supplier store on Alibaba.com, you'll probably see that all they sell is golf balls, or their main product is golf balls, and they sell a couple of like related products. So if their main product is golf balls and they're selling a couple of related products and it says manufacturer or manufacturer slash trading company, then I would say that they manufacture the golf balls. Those other little products they're probably getting from other suppliers, but because they're very related to their core product, it makes sense for them to sell it as well because it's an easy sell to bundle them. Another important metric I'd look at is main markets. So if you're a US buyer, you likely want to deal with suppliers who are familiar with the US market. So if you're working with a supplier, their main market is North America, that likely means that they're more familiar with the quality standards of the US market. They're more familiar with buyer needs, with the importation requirements and stuff like that. So if I was a seller and I was looking for something that would meet my quality standards and I wouldn't have to worry a lot about like the ability of the supplier to meet the requirements of the US market, then I'd look for suppliers who focus as one of their top three main markets is North America. Um, if I was looking for something that was like super cheap, maybe like I don't care particularly about getting something high quality, getting something that is made for the American consumer. I'm just looking for the cheapest thing possible. Then one strategy could be, all right, then look for vendors whose main markets are primarily Africa, the Middle East, places where The quality standards, the market standards are probably lower than the US standards in general. And then finally, there's a section called advantages. This is an ongoing project where Alibaba is trying to tag suppliers with different key strengths, so it's easier for buyers to see what their strengths are, their core strengths, or some key advantages that they could offer. The last thing, sorry, there's one more thing. So you're on the comparison page. You can go to view product details here, and then that will bring up the actual response from vendor. So when you look at the response from the vendor, there's a couple of things to do a quick judgment. Um, One is the relevancy of the response. Um, so are they answering particular questions you may have asked, or are they providing particular information you requested? You can also look at like the personalized written response of the vendor. So some buyers, they're looking for a supplier, it's easy to communicate with them. um, you want someone that's like attentive to your needs. There's not like a huge language or cultural barrier. You can kind of gauge the supplier's like language skills or personal skills by looking at their personalized response to your RFQ.
Excellent, very thorough. And that advantages metric, I think that's something new that I haven't seen before. So that is that like who fills that in? Does Alibaba fill that in, or does the suppliers provide that themselves?
This Alibaba fills in.
Interesting. Okay. All right. So that's great. Is it okay if I remove the screen share so we get back to our faces and we continue?
You got it.
All right. So we have some more questions coming in. I want to save some time at the end, so let's keep going. I think those were most of the questions that we had discussed with Brett. I like to get to some of the questions that were pre-submitted based on my summary of the over 400 responses. Does that sound okay with you, Brett?
Yeah, it sounds great.
All right. So many sellers, especially seven-figure sellers, they struggle with finding a quality manufacturer. How can one do that in the RFQ process, if it's even possible? What are your best tips for these more experienced sellers, Brett?
So my answer is mostly a repeat of what I just said. I would say look at the key metrics, like the type of business they are. So if you're looking to deal directly with the manufacturer, you can meet the MOQs. You can handle potentially like importing stuff based on FOB trade terms. Then use that metric and then look at their main products so you can see their core competencies. Like if you find a company, it's a manufacturer slash trading company, but the product they're offering doesn't fall within their main products category, then they may not be the strongest supplier for you. They're selling it as like an auxiliary product. Another thing would be look at their main markets. So like if you're concerned about quality, if you're concerned about the supplier understanding the needs of like a US consumer, that would definitely be something. You can also go to the verified suppliers profile page and look at the size of the business. So some like trading companies, they're only like 1 to 5, 5 to 10 people, so they're small, they're probably really focused. It may not be the right fit for you. If you're looking for someone that has a lot of production capacity, they've been in business a long time, then you can find that verified information on verified suppliers profiles, when the business was established, the size of their business.
Very good. Okay. And um, one of the other top questions is this whole process can be very time consuming. How long does the sourcing process take on average, and what can people do to save time? Right.
Got it. Well, I would say the initial sourcing is very time consuming. So RFQ is the tool that Alibaba has built to try to take that initial sourcing time frame of reaching out to a whole bunch of suppliers, talking to them individually about the details. RFQ is that tool to kind of narrow down that time frame to something more consumable and easier to get the job done. So, like I said previously, like RFQ, you can get connected with up to 10 vendors. It's good to work RFQ as well. Like, so you send out an RFQ and you don't get the responses that you're expecting. I would first gauge the responses that you got, decide maybe you didn't get the right responses because you didn't use the right keywords or you didn't describe the product in the right way. So in that situation, I would go to the search tool, find something that you're looking for, look how the product is described, like the keywords, you can use a picture from it, something like that, and then post another RFQ. So usually you'll get good results with the first RFQ. If you really want to work it, then post, one, two, three RFQs, and that should basically cover all of the basis for the suppliers that you could reach out to. There are some niche categories. Probably not most of the categories that our audience deals with, but more in like industrial categories where it may be harder to find a vendor because there's just not as big a supplier base. So if you run into that issue where you don't get quality responses through RFQ and you're looking for a very niche product, then you may have to turn to the search tool to work those results.
Great.
But
Okay.
sorry, I
Yeah.
think I got distracted. The original question was how long does the process take? So
Yes.
I would say, especially now, it's months long process. So if you're ordering a sample, like, so the initial outreach to suppliers and discussing details, that may be anywhere from a couple of days to a month, depending on how complicated or complex your requirements are and how much time you're going to spend each night talking to suppliers, obviously with the time difference if you're in North America. Um,
Mhm.
then you'll probably want to do a sampling stage. So to do a sample, to get a sample shipped over, that'll likely be weeks. If you are doing bigger orders, then you may want to do like a factory inspection to just verify different key points that you're interested in about the factory. That's going to take another couple of days, and then when you get into full production for your order, I would say full production's anywhere from a month to 3 months, depending on how large the order is and the complexity of the manufacturing process. So to summarize, I would say if you're placing an order, expect anywhere from 2 to 6 months for the entire process, depending on how much work is actually involved.
Excellent. And in terms of timing, Chinese New Year is coming up, February 1st, 2022. What can sellers do to prepare? When should they place their orders so they don't miss the boat before Chinese New Year?
Get started now. My suggestion would be to get started as early as possible. So I mean,
Mhm.
last year, I forgot exactly when Chinese New Year was. The beginning of this year. I'm sorry, not last year. But it was around the end of January, beginning of February. So last year, I had something go out. Um, I'm so sorry. It's this year.
Yep.
This year in January, I had something go out around the 12th or the 15th, and it made it out before Chinese New Year, but
Mhm.
it was a very nervous experience because basically we had something scheduled for the beginning of January, and then the container kept on getting like kicked back. Like the
Mhm.
ship would arrive late, or there wasn't enough space, and then since
Hmm.
we weren't paying the highest price possible, we got
Hmm.
thrown on the waiting list. So the container actually ended up going out several weeks after it was originally scheduled to. So I mean, really, the
Yeah.
only advice is just to try to get started with the process as early as possible, because
Right.
delays are to be expected, and it's really difficult to judge how long the delays are going to be right now.
Yeah. Yeah, makes sense. I mean, traditionally in the supply chain world, people say that you should place your orders before mid-November, like Thanksgiving US. But now, given the whole delays and the backlog, like the port of Long Beach, there were like 70 container ships just anchored there. They can't even get in. We're saying, like, bump that up even earlier, Halloween or even earlier. I mean, it's very unpredictable this year. It's very
Yeah,
volatile. All right. Switching gears a little bit, talking about pricing, right? This is probably number one for a lot of people. Um, a lot of sellers ask, how can you get the real price, or, like the market price, and not a quote that's too high? I know you touched upon this a little bit in your RFQ. Can you just help our sellers better understand that pricing question?
definitely. So it's difficult to say, like, from, what would you call it, a an objective position as a buyer, what exactly the price should be, unless, like, you've been in the industry many years for that product, you followed it a long time, and you just have experience to gauge it. If you're looking at new products, stuff where you don't buy it all the time, you're not familiar with exactly what it should cost, then the best strategy is to collect quotes from many different suppliers and compare the price points, and then gauge what the price should be. Of course, there's going to be variance because of different quality, um, but comparing different suppliers, getting a few samples from different suppliers, and then kind of doing an analysis of the quality to price for these different samples will help you decide what the best price is. And you can always, uh, there, I don't have an exact formula, but if you see something selling, you can kind of deduct, from what you see it selling at retail to what you want to pay for the for the product, in order for it to make, in order for the price to make sense for you to make a profit. I have a
Mhm.
I actually had a buyer, um, 2 months ago, that reached out to me. He sells to, like, Walmart, Target, a lot of those big box
Mhm.
retailers, and that was kind of the strategy he used. Like, he identifies uh, a product that he wants to sell, a market that's hot. He knows what the product can sell for, and then he works backwards and establishes, a price that he's willing to pay for the product, and then sources based on that price.
Mhm. Mhm. That's great advice. All right. Great. Let's talk a little bit about IP protection, intellectual property protection. How can sellers protect themselves so they don't get their designs stolen or copied all over Alibaba? I've actually had this happen to one of my prior designs, and I saw there was a question from in the chat from Deborah as well. What's Brett's recommendation in searching for a manufacturer who will customize a product for you without worrying about getting your IP stolen? As you know, some things cannot get patented. What's your advice, Brett?
All right. This is a great question. I don't personally have a whole lot of experience in this area, because most of the products that I've worked with have been minor customization. It's kind of like an industry where, there's many different knockoff versions of what you're selling, so it wasn't a huge issue. But based on what I've seen other people do, and just common practices that I've heard of, it's important to have that discussion with the supplier, and take steps to kind of protect yourself before you get too far into the process. So an NDA agreement, or some a formal agreement between you and the supplier, is useful. How useful? If you're intellectual property gets stolen, I can't really advise on that, just because if you're a US seller and the supplier is in China, obviously being in two different countries makes it a lot harder to enforce it. But coming up with a written contract with the supplier, getting everything down on paper before you get too far into the process, before you release information to them that you would consider um, private information, information that you don't want them to misuse. Get all that down on paper. And then we also have a section on the Alibaba website. If you Google it, I don't know the exact address, but if you Google it, I believe it's like IPP Alibaba. We do have a platform that addresses intellectual property issues. If you do end up working with a vendor and then they misuse your intellectual property, it's a platform that allows you to provide proof of your intellectual property, and then Alibaba can take action to get it removed from the website.
Excellent. That's great. We're just about out of time, Brett. Just to keep us on schedule, for people that want to connect with you and learn more, what's the best way to do that? And I also understand you have the RFQ tool as well, the URL that we will share.
Sure thing. Yeah, if you could throw me back up to screen share one last time.
Yep.
All right. So here are two things. I think buyer.alibaba.com, which you can see here, is a really great resource for anyone that's interested in just learning more about the workflow through Alibaba.com, reaching out to vendors. There's articles about international trade, trade terms. There's lots of stuff to learn, lots of resources on buyer.alibaba.com. If you're a larger buyer and you're sourcing currently for an order of $30,000 or more, you're welcome to send the RFQ directly to me as a part of the RFQ Pro service. My email is here, and I'll be happy to advise if it's something we can help you out with.
All right. Excellent. And I also shared the URL rfq.alibaba.com. Brett, can you share a little bit more about that, please?
Yes, yeah. So rfq.alibaba.com. I don't have a screenshot here, but basically it'll bring you to the landing page of RFQ, and then you'll be able to enter in and post an RFQ to the Alibaba supplier market through that link.
All right. Perfect. And is that for larger buyers?
So this link will bring you to the RFQ tool on the website. That's for any
Mhm.
size buyer to use.
Okay.
So everything
Excellent.
I've discussed about the RFQ tool today,
Yeah.
go to this link, and then that's the tool you can use to get it all done.
Okay. Perfect. And that's free, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's awesome. All right. Brett, this has been awesome. Do you have a couple more minutes or do you have to run? If you got to run, we totally respect that.
I got a couple more minutes. We can take another question or two.
Okay. Excellent. So let me just remove the screen share because I do want to get to some of the questions in the chat as well. We had a question earlier from Araceli. How do we handle the price increase and delays on the big shipping issue? Any thoughts on that, Brett?
Oh man, this is an issue that I think would be difficult to handle from a sourcing standpoint, because you're already in a relationship with the vendor. I when it comes to stuff like this, I think communication with the vendor is important. So they're
Mm,
obviously familiar with the current state of the market in China, raw material costs and stuff like that. So if you're concerned about this or about shipping issues, ask them their opinion, ask them like how they see the market right now, because they can often provide like local insights about like shipping delays or expected price increases that you as a buyer would probably never get a hold of that information. But your supplier would be able to advise on it.
Excellent. All right. And guys, I forgot to mention one thing. If this has been helpful to you guys, I would really appreciate if you clicked like and also subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube, because that would help us to help spread the word so other people can learn more about Seven Figure Seller Summit, 80/20 sourcing to help you build, scale, and exit your business. Okay, thanks for that. Another quick question from Liz Eugene. How can we find a supplier that we don't have to compete with selling the same products in the US? Right.
This is another question I get a lot from Amazon sellers.
Mhm.
Um, it's challenging because if I had the exact answer for this, then I could probably sell all the products on Amazon.com and come up with competing products and leave Alibaba. It takes a lot of work to do this. So
Right.
if you see a hot selling product on Amazon and you want to find something similar that's not currently being sold on Amazon, you'd probably have to look for a supplier who makes that category of products, reach out to them, and discuss modifying the product. Obviously, you would want to modify it as little as possible to get the job done. Modifications to products can sometimes be very costly. If you have to open up a new mold, if you have to completely redesign it in CAD. So it's not an easy and straightforward process, but it's definitely something that can be done. And it just requires a lot of engagement with suppliers to see what's doable and how easy and affordable it is to make those modifications so you can get a product onto Amazon that isn't just like a very visual copycat of what's already being sold.
Mhm. Excellent. All right. And Yannick asks, how do you ensure quality stays on for second and on orders?
It's a good question. So I'd say there's two things you can do to proactively ensure the quality of your order, and then there's one thing you can do uh, reactively to ensure it. So the two things to do proactively is one, do inspections on your order. So depending on what you're buying, the complexity of the product and the manufacturing process, that'll determine when you should do inspections at what stage. But doing an inspection before the product leaves the factory, I would say is always important. So you can do different levels of inspection. If it's just a small order, then I would do like a visual inspection that's done by the supplier themselves. So ask them to basically create a checklist for the supplier to go through to confirm that they did this, that they did that, that the color matches this PMS color, that the sizing is right, that the order is packed correctly. You get that checklist to the supplier, have them confirm everything, have them send you over pictures to confirm everything. And if it's a small order, if you trust the supplier, that's the best way to do your due diligence and make sure that the order leaves the factory as it should. If it's a larger order, if you're spending more money, you probably want to get a third party inspection company in there. You still want to create that checklist, all the points that need to be checked. You can have the factory send you over a couple of random samples from the full production run. Do a check yourself as well, but also tell the suppliers that they should be expecting these inspections. Because if you let a
Mhm.
supplier think that you're never going to do checking, then it just gives them the opportunity to be careless, to forget, to make mistakes and think it's not a big deal. So set your
Yeah.
standards, tell them that you're going to be checking, and then that's one way. The second layer of that would be if you're working with an Alibaba supplier, then do the order through trade assurance. And then
Mhm.
when you do the trade assurance order, make sure that the PI or the purchase order for the order is uploaded to the trade assurance order on the platform, and that it spells out how the order is supposed to look in terms of quality or any other specifications. So if you receive an order and there's a big quality issue, then you can file a dispute with Alibaba. And because it's a trade assurance order, Alibaba can step in and help you come to a resolution for the order, including getting your money back in some situations. So those are two things to do to prepare and make sure that you get the best quality. And then obviously when you actually receive the product, to do an inspection if it's possible. And then if there's any quality issues, reach out to the supplier. If the supplier isn't willing to resolve it, reach out to Alibaba within
Mm,
the trade order time frame. It'll
mm.
show like a countdown clock on your trade assurance order on the platform. Reach out, provide the documentation that the quality doesn't meet your standards, and then we'll be able to help resolve it.
Perfect. Let's wrap up with just a last question because I want to be respectful of Brett's time and everyone's time as well. Let's talk about MOQs. This is a big question for a lot of sellers, especially the ones starting out. Patricia asks, I'm getting a lot of resistance to securing a smaller MOQ. They want big shipments. Will they compromise with me so I can stay within my budget? Any tips on diplomacy, Brett?
All right. So for smaller MOQs, like the best way to get those smaller MOQs is to work through trading companies. Um, Trading companies have the buying power with the factories they work with. So like their order with that producer isn't just your small order. They can lump it into the larger picture of their orders for that year, and then they can usually work that leverage to offer you smaller MOQs. That's really the best way.
Very good. Excellent, Brett. So we covered a lot today, talking about RFQs, talking about quality, saving time, the two different search methods. If you could distill everything we talked about today and apply the 80-20 rule, what would your number one recommendation be to everyone watching if they want to find the best supplier in the shortest amount of time possible?
Got it. All right. Do preparation before you reach out to suppliers. Use the RFQ tool to reach out to suppliers, and then work some of the methods and tips that I provided today to kind of distill the results into the top leads and then work those top leads.
Excellent. It reminds me of that old Abe Lincoln quote, right? If he had like 5 hours to chop down a tree, he'll spend 3 hours sharpening that axe, right? To make
I
sure it goes through like knife through butter. So
love it.
definitely sharpen your RFQ, guys. Talk to Brett. Consider the RFQ tools, and hopefully this helps, guys. So Brett, thank you again so much for coming on today, sharing all this knowledge. I hope this is helpful to everybody watching. Thank you everybody for coming on. Good luck with your sourcing. I know it's tough this right now with all of the challenges, but with every crisis there is opportunity. So keep at it, stay strong, guys. Keep taking action. We will see you guys at the next session. Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Happy sourcing.